feed the country. So why wouldn't we want to make sure that the poorest amongst us get the nutrition that they need? It helps every American.
All right, Congressman, and we will leave it there as the doors open on the House floor. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Live coverage of the House.
The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., January 29, 2014. I hereby appoint the Honorable Randy Hultgren to act as Speaker Pro Tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. We give you thanks, O God, for giving us another day. As you make available to your people the grace and knowledge to meet the needs of the day, we pray that your Spirit will be upon the members of this people's house, giving them the richness of your wisdom. Bless the members of the majority party as they gather these next days. May they, with those who accompany them, travel safely and meet in peace. Bless also the minority party as they prepare their own gathering. May these days be filled with hopeful anticipation. May the power of your truth and our faith in your providence give them all the confidence they must have to do the good work required for service to our nation. Give all members the strength of purpose and clarity of mind to do those things that bring justice and mercy to people and maintain freedom and liberty for our land. May all that is done this day be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, I demand a vote on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal.
The question is on agreeing to the Speaker's approval of the journal. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The journal stands approved.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arkansas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I object to the vote on the grounds that a quorum is not present and make the point of order that a quorum is not present.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Barletta.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 5 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition? Gentleman is recognized.
I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection. Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to honor J. Buck Swisher upon his retirement as a field representative for Pennsylvania's 11th Congressional District. A lifelong resident of Pennsylvania, Buck graduated from Biglerville High School in 1968 and attended the DeVry Institute of Technology in Chicago, Illinois. He entered the United States Army, serving as an instructor and radar technician in the Signal Corps from 1970 to 1973. After leaving the Army, Buck dedicated 30 years to the telephone industry. Buck began working as a field representative for Congressman Todd Platts in September 2003 before coming to work in my Carlisle office in January 2013. Throughout more than 10 years of federal service, he has assisted countless residents of Cumberland County with everything from Medicare to the presentation of Girl Scout and Boy Scout awards. Outside the office, Buck is an active member of the Cumberland County community. He's a devoted husband to his wife Diane and a proud father to 4 daughters and 3 grandchildren. Mr. Speaker, for over 10 years, Buck Swisher has shown outstanding dedication to Cumberland County. I commend him on his hard work and commitment and wish him the best on his retirement. He will be greatly missed. I yield back the balance.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Vermont seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I understand our Republican colleagues are about to head off for their annual retreat in Cambridge, Maryland, to discuss their priorities for the year, including whether to raise the debt ceiling or not. Well, my hope is that the majority party listens to Speaker Boehner on the debt ceiling. Earlier this month, he said, "All I know is we should not default on our debt. We shouldn't even get close to it." The Speaker understands that America pays its bills. Good for him. The Speaker understands that even the threat of default will harm the American economy, and he's right. And the Speaker understands that holding hostage America's full faith and credit is a dead-end plan for his party and for America. Speaker Boehner, I surely hope that you prevail on the majority party. America is not a deadbeat nation. America pays its bills. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Indiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's been a frigid winter in the Hoosier State. Sub-zero temperatures and Arctic conditions have forced school closings, travel bans, and challenges for the business community. The demand for propane and home heating fuels is at an all-time high. As a result, federal officials declared a state of emergency for the Midwest, lifting hours of service limitations for motor carriers to ensure consumers can steadily receive home heating fuel. But this waiver only remains into effect until February 11th. Today I led a letter with other Hoosier lawmakers to U.S. Department of Transportation requesting the emergency exemption be extended. Winter weather is unpredictable, but if we're ready to act, we can alleviate this stress for our families. This simple extension is a common-sense way to provide some much-needed relief for Hoosiers as we weather this harsh winter. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back the balance of her time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a sad moment as we consider a farm bill that has the least amount of reform possible to secure package. I'm thankful that some of the most hateful and egregious, like the King Amendment, have been stripped out, but the savings from direct payments will be swallowed up by enriched crop insurance. My friend Paul Ryan is concerned that the safety net for the poor has become too comfortable a hammock. But this farm bill is now a lounge chair for rich agribusiness interests who need it the most. It should be a scandal that there are more cuts to food stamp benefits while further enriching crop insurance for wealthy agribusiness. The time is to start now to avoid another congressional grab bag that cheats the American farmers. And thank you, Trudy, for years of dedicated service to Congress and the American people.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Indiana seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I come to the floor in strong opposition to the Farm Bill Conference Report. The Farm Bill is just more business as usual here in Washington. Last summer, the American people won an important victory for common sense and transparency when we ended this unholy alliance between food stamps and farm programs. Together in this House, we defeated business as usual by passing the first farm-only farm bill in nearly 40 years. But business as usual fought back, and here we are today. Not only does this farm bill recombine food stamps and farm programs, it actually spends even more than the first bill the Senate passed. This is exactly the kind of log rolling that we fought to prevent this summer. Mr. Speaker, Congress works best when we do our work in the full light of day. Unfortunately, this farm bill was written behind closed doors. It has stripped long-term reforms. It spends money we simply don't have, and it stripped out important policies that negatively affect our livestock industry. As a farmer and a conservative, I will not vote to take a step backwards. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in recognizing the public service of Ron Green, a U.S. Navy veteran. Ron Green is the director of the San Joaquin County Veterans Service Office, advocating for veterans and helping them navigate the Department of Veterans Affairs. After nearly 14 years of service as the county's VSO director, Ron Green will retire on February 1st. Before his career with the county, Mr. Green worked at the Sharp Defense Depot and the Defense Distribution Center at Lathrop, and as the VA claims examiner. In total, Mr. Green has more than 30 years of service to veterans and the public. As someone who knows Ron Green personally, I can attest to his commitment and dedication to the veterans of San Joaquin County. Mr. Green has been personally responsible for lowering the number of homeless veterans in San Joaquin County. He has supported our local Veterans History Project efforts and has been a valuable partner on veterans issues over the years, including advocating for the VA to locate an expanded regional outpatient clinic and new community living center in San Joaquin County. He will be missed by the veterans of San Joaquin County, and I wish him all the best in the years ahead. And I ask my colleagues to join me in honoring the public service contributions of Ron Green. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ag producers have waited nearly 3 years for a long-term farm bill, and I would like to thank my colleagues for their efforts thus far. Policy certainty will help our country be competitive. Last year, conferees were appointed to negotiate and resolve differences between the House and Senate versions of the Farm Bill. The House bill included language meant to encourage compromise on a fix to avoid trade retaliation from Canada and Mexico and bar individual states with unscientific laws from disrupting interstate commerce, something which will only burden producers and increase costs for consumers. I tend to believe if we're going to call a piece of legislation the Farm Bill, the measure ought to recognize that farmers and ranchers are the primary stewards of our natural resources, as well as the animals in their care. This Farm Bill does include important reforms, such as eliminating direct payments, and it helps hardworking taxpayers in finding an estimated $23 billion in savings. And ultimately, Mr. Speaker, I support this return to regular order. For these reasons, I will support the conference report before us today, but it is my hope this body will act quickly to find solutions to the outstanding issues not addressed in this bill. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to mark the 5th anniversary of the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, a critical law that championed the principle of equal pay for equal work. While this law made strides in closing the wage gap, across the country, women still earn only 77 cents to a dollar that a man makes for the exact same work. This gap results in more than $11,000 less that a woman makes every year. That means women are essentially working 84 days for free while a man takes home a paycheck. In the District of Illinois that I serve, women make even less than that. They make approximately 70 cents on the dollar. Keep in mind that number is figured for the same work, but with just much less income. Equal pay is not simply a women's issue. It is an issue for the middle class, and it is an issue for working families. When women bring home more, they are able to provide better for their families. Because equal pay for equal work would benefit hardworking families across my region, across the state of Illinois, and across the country, it is time that Congress pass the Paycheck Fairness Act. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, the President addressed America and reminded us that America is a nation of opportunity, where if you work hard, you play by the rules, you take responsibility, that you can succeed. But also recognize that many Americans don't feel that, in fact, this is working for them right now. And he made very specific proposals to invest in infrastructure, our innovation economy, early childhood education, additional manufacturing hubs, raising the minimum wage, fixing our broken immigration system, and extending unemployment benefits. The President expressed his willingness to work with Congress to achieve these goals. And what I thought was particularly significant, these were specific proposals that are achievable if we work together. So, Mr. Speaker, let's get to work. Let's enact these proposals. Let's move our economy forward and put the American people back to work. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the balance of his time.
Mr. Speaker.
Without objection, so ordered.
Chair lays before the House a communication.
Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable the Speaker, House of Representatives. Sir, pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on January 28, 2014 at 6:07 p.m. that the Senate passed Senate 1302. Signed sincerely, Karen L. Haas.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I call up the conference report on the bill H.R. 2642, the Agricultural Act of 2014, and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2642, an act to provide for the reform and continuation of agriculture and other programs of the Department of Agriculture through fiscal year 2018 and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 465, the conference report is considered read. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, and the gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Peterson, each will control 30 minutes. For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, is the gentleman from Minnesota opposed to the conference report?
Is the gentleman from Minnesota opposed to the conference report?
No. Am I opposed to it? No, yes.
Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 22, the gentleman from Oklahoma, the gentleman from Minnesota, and the gentleman from Massachusetts will control 20 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I might consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleagues, this has been a long and seemingly epic journey that the House Agriculture Committee has been upon. Mr. Peterson, myself, our colleagues, literally 3 years, actually 4 when you consider the beginning hearings under then Chairman Peterson, to start this process. We've all discussed the details. We'll discuss the details more in greater length in just a moment on this final conference report that reflects the net result of both the Senate and House work. But I would say this. Whatever your feelings might be about the policy issues involved within the bill, understand this formal conference that's now come to a conclusion, soon I hope to be ratified by the body, reflects at the committee level, at the floor level in the House, and I think in the conference level, how legislation should be put together. Many people criticize us and this body as dysfunctional. But if they look at all of the amendments we considered every time we took the Farm Bill up in the committee, all of the debate, all of the discussion, if they consider the amazing amount of amendments we considered on the floor of the United States House and all the debate and the discussion and the votes, if they take note of how long and how much effort the principals and the conferees put into putting this conference report together, they would understand that this bill, while everyone may not agree with every line, every word, every policy in it, this bill reflects, unlike almost any that have been done for years, how it should be done. Good men and women of different opinion working to get to a final product. I hope that this reflects a change in how we'll do our business here across the board. But I'm proud of what we've done, and I'm proud of how we've done it. I'm proud of the reforms and the savings. I'm proud of my ranking member and all my colleagues who've been involved. Reserve the balance of my time, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Today, after, as the Chairman said, after nearly 4 years of work, the House is finally considering the 2014 Farm Bill Conference Report. It's been a challenging and at times frustrating process. I think everybody will agree. But through it, the Ag Committee persevered, and we did what we've always done. We worked together. The report before us today represents a compromise. I know this is rare in Washington, but that's what needed to actually get something done around this place. I didn't get everything I wanted. The Chairman didn't get everything he wanted. And that's how the compromise works. For example, there's been a lot of discussion about dairy, but we are moving away from the old dairy program to a new program that I think is much more sensible, that has market signals in it to deal with overproduction. The only question I have is whether they're going to be strong enough. We'll find out as we go through the process. In the commodity title, you know, I'm still disappointed we didn't go to planted acres. I think it would have been a smart thing to do, but it wasn't to be. At the end of the day, I believe my reservations are outweighed by the need to provide a long-term certainty for agriculture and nutrition programs and the many positive improvements and reforms included in the final bill. Among other things, the conference report will protect and improve the crop insurance system, probably the most important safety net, continues current sugar policy, streamlines conservation programs so that we can continue to preserve our natural resources, provides a disaster assistance for livestock producers, applies conservation protections to crop insurance, and recognizes the growing consumer demand for fresh fruits, vegetables, and local foods and organics. So in closing, I want to thank the Chairman for his work and congratulate him for getting us, working with us to get to a final conclusion here. And also for his members, our members, for their support and hanging in there to get to this point. And I also want to thank the Agriculture Committee staff who have been working so hard over these last years, night and day, through all these different situations we've been in. And I would like to submit their names for the record, if that is okay. So again, Mr. Speaker, this process has gone on too long. We need to conclude it today, and I urge my colleagues to support the conference report. Yield back, or reserve.
Gentleman from Minnesota reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 2 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Peterson for all their hard work on this very difficult bill. I admire their tenacity and I admire their passion on issues dealing with agriculture. There are some good things in this bill, to be sure, but there are some things that I simply cannot accept. I think as we discuss this farm bill that we should remind ourselves of a few simple facts. Facts like this: hunger exists in the United States of America. Not a single congressional district in this country is hunger-free. Our food banks, our food pantries, the people who are on the front lines in the fight against hunger simply cannot do any more. They're stretched to the limit. And one final fact: this bill will make hunger worse in America, not better. If this bill passes, thousands and thousands of low-income Americans will see their already meager food benefits shrink. And for what? Why? To meet some arbitrary deficit reduction goal? To pay the cost of the giveaways and the crop insurance program? To pay for the sweetheart deals for the sushi rice growers and the peanut farmers and God knows who else? I know many of my colleagues would just like this whole farm bill issue to go away. They want to pass a bill and forget about it and move on to something else. But, Mr. Speaker, the people who will be hurt by this bill aren't going away. They can't forget about it and move on to something else because they'll suffer. They will have to make do with less food tomorrow than they have today. And I've heard all the arguments trying to justify this $8.6 billion cut in SNAP. Well, it's just a loophole, or it could have been a lot worse. Or the state should pick up the slack, or local governments, or churches, or food banks, or the tooth fairy. Those arguments are easy to make from the comfort of our warm homes and our full bellies, but they ring hollow to an elderly person who will have to take their medicine on an empty stomach, or a child who will have to skip a breakfast before going to school. I think it's wrong, and I cannot support it. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield one of my outstanding subcommittee chairmen, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford. 1 minute.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman. I want to thank Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Peterson for putting in so much hard work and dedication to getting where we are today, and I echo the Ranking Member's sentiments to the staff. Thank you very much for everything that you've done. After more than 3 years of being involved in the Farm Bill process, I'm proud to support a final product that not only greatly benefits producers but deploys investments and jobs to rural America. Despite our sharp regional differences, we prevailed in crafting commodity programs that promote regional fairness by providing a strong safety net that protects all producers from market risk. We can finally provide relief to our cattlemen by permanently reauthorizing disaster assistance programs after years of hardship. Rural development funding will bring critical investments to our rural communities, while conservation and forestry programs will preserve our natural resources for years to come. While I'm pleased with the Farm Bill before us today, I am disappointed that we left some important issues on the table, like reforming harmful gypsum regulations and fixing country of origin labeling for the meat industry. We could have gone further in relieving burdensome EPA regulations on small farmers, and I believe that environmental activists in the Senate had far too much input. Even though I believe we could have done more, I'm proud of the conservative reforms we've made to the food stamp program by eliminating waste loopholes, setting the stage for work requirements. The Agriculture Committee accomplished the tough goal of cutting billions from our budget by repealing or consolidating dozens of programs. I appreciate the patience of all of our Arkansas producers and rural communities through this process. I strongly urge a yes vote on this Farm Bill conference report and yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose? Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Costa.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this conference committee report. There are a lot of reasons why, but first I'd like to commend the chairman and the ranking members of both the House and the Senate Ag committees and my fellow conferees and the staff for all the hard work that went into reaching this agreement. While this is not a perfect bill, there never is, this agreement is a result of more than 4 years of bipartisan negotiations, 2 marathon committee meeting markups, multiple floor debates. Matter of fact, this bill almost reminds me of the movie Groundhog Day because it seems to come back and back again. For my home state of California, the leading agricultural state in the nation, this Farm Bill is a dramatic investment in many of the specialty crops for research, for market production, and the development programs which benefit our vegetable and fruit producers, of which we produce over half the nation's supply. These programs not only help my constituents produce the safest and most nutritious fruits and vegetables that we eat throughout the nation, but also throughout the world. Just as important for my district are the disaster relief programs that help farmers, ranchers, and dairymen and producers through these difficult times. Many may not be aware, but California is facing the driest year on record, which jeopardizes both food production and jobs in my district. This bill contains programs that provide help when disaster strikes, from drilling wells to providing seed or direct assistance to growers or cattlemen who have been hurt by this devastating drought. While I support the conference committee report, I am disappointed that we did not take the opportunity to resolve the meat labeling issue that threatens our beef and poultry producers and our important trading partners, Canada and Mexico, who are deemed critical and are dealing with us in the World Trade Organization. I'm currently drafting legislation on a bipartisan basis to try to fix this labeling issue once and for all. This debate, though, has dragged on for way too long. Let's give farmers and ranchers and dairy producers the certainty that they deserve through a 5-year farm bill. Now is the time to get this farm bill done by passing this conference committee report. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Kind.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 3 minutes. Without objections to order, gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my good friend from Massachusetts for yielding me this time and for the leadership that he's shown on the nutrition title and for the plight of hunger throughout our country. It's commendable. Mr. Speaker, I've been here for a few farm bills in the past. I used to be a member of the Agriculture Committee. I certainly appreciate how very difficult it is to put together a bipartisan farm bill with so many different moving parts. I have all the respect and admiration for the leadership in the committee,
But I also sense that we've reached a point of fatigue and exhaustion. People just want this farm bill to go away after years of being worked on it, and I appreciate that too. But we're only given one opportunity every 5, or in this case 7 years, to reform farm policy to make it better. To make it better for our family farmers, to make it more responsible for the American taxpayer, to make production agriculture work for all Americans. And I'm afraid that this farm bill yet again pulls up short. And I would beseech my colleagues to take a little additional time to work on some reform measures that do make sense. Rather than looking at another $8.6 billion in cuts to the nutrition title on top of previous cuts that have already been had, let's look at some of these subsidy programs. I'm afraid that the bill before us today maintains huge taxpayer subsidies that go to a few but very large agribusinesses at the expense of our family farmers around the country. It's going to lead to greater consolidation in production agriculture. It's going to continue to drive up land values. It's going to make it harder for new beginning farmers to enter the occupation. It's not responsible to these family farmers, and it's certainly not responsible to the American taxpayer. We've got historically high commodity target prices in this bill, so any slight dip is going to mean huge payments going out in the future. We've got the multiple entity rule now that we worked on in the previous farm bill being rolled back in this one. We've got payment limitation caps now being increased rather than brought down to where the will of this Congress was last year when we had that debate on the floor. And while it's commendable that we're getting rid of the direct payment program, which was not justifiable, most of that money is being shifted now into the crop insurance program, which what I feel is overly generous premium subsidy, crop insurance subsidies to producers, which has the potential of taking further risk out of production decisions. But we're also telling the private crop insurance companies we're going to guarantee you a 14% profit margin. We're going to pay your entire administrative and operating expenses. And by the way, you're going to bear very little risk in offering these policies. The American taxpayer will still bear that risk. There's not a business in the world that wouldn't sign up for that offer. So why are we doing that in this farm bill? Representative Petri and I last year offered a common-sense, modicum reform of the crop insurance program, asking these crop insurance companies put a little more skin in the game. We understand it's a valuable risk management tool that needs to be there for producers, but this goes overboard with it. And then finally, we've got a domestic cotton program that's gotten us into trouble with Brazil. If the average taxpayer knew that for the last 4 years we funneled out $150 million worth of taxpayer subsidies going to subsidize Brazil cotton farmers, they'd be livid. And yet this bill does not fix that cotton problem, and now it's up to Brazil whether they want to level economic sanctions against us. More work needs to happen, and unfortunately this bill pulls up short. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to recognize for 1 minute one of our hardest working subcommittee chairmen, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Conway.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong support of the Farm Bill. The legislation provides much-needed reforms. It's fiscally responsible, saving billions in mandatory spending, promoting market-based solutions, and streamlining and consolidating more than 100 programs. We've eliminated direct payments, which farmers received whether there were good times or bad, and replaced them with a safety net that provides help only when the farmers need it. The bill includes the most significant reform to food stamp programs since the welfare reform of 1996. While I am personally disappointed that we didn't fix the COOL and GIPSA issues, and I'm committed to continue to work those, I do believe that this bill provides a balanced opportunity and security and strengthens our nation's agriculture safety net for years to come. I would urge my colleagues to vote yes on the safety net, vote yes for these modest reforms to food stamps, pass this conference report, give our farmers and ranchers across this country the 5 years of stability and security they need to execute their business plans to allow them to continue to provide the American people with the most affordable and abundant food and fiber supply in the developed world. Vote yes on the conference report. I yield back.
Bills back. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Schrader.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I guess for some people, you just can't do enough. I'd argue respectfully to a lot of my colleagues that the work that's gone on both sides of the aisle over the last 2 years is actually pretty exemplary. The Farm Bill is always a difficult bill to pass. I believe the last one was vetoed a couple of times and it had to be overridden. This bill, we're not at that point, but we've had a lot of bumps along the road. And it could be better. It could be better. But I've never yet seen legislation that's exactly what I'd perfectly like to be voting on at the end of the day. We make huge strides in this bill. There were draconian cuts to the SNAP and food stamp program that are no longer in here. There were onerous requirements and incentives to get people off food stamps that are no longer in here. And for those that say people are automatically going to be cut as a result of this, that's not accurate. If the states step up and actually put $20 towards the heating assistance for these low-income folks that hopefully need that, they don't get a reduced benefit. And yes, it's a reduced benefit. They still qualify for their base benefit in this bill. Moreover, if they just bring their heating and cooling bills in, they can still get the expanded benefit. It just requires a little more diligence, hopefully put some faith in America that their food stamp and SNAP programs going to those who really need it. As far as the subsidies go, hey, yeah, maybe we should change that. We should work on that some more. There will be another farm bill in 4 or 5 years. But we made huge strides. We get rid of the direct payments program. That's monumental, folks. We've been trying to do that for 20 years. The subsidies, the milk program, it's totally new. We're on a margin insurance program. I think America understands that type of thing. We've made huge strides here, and there's so many good things. For some of my colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle, I mean, at the end of the day, it's pretty imperative that we've made huge strides in the specialty crop provisions, the organic provisions. We've done great with market access promotion programs. We've made it so that American farmers continue to produce the best food and fiber with a safety net that makes sure that the people in this country get the food they need and deserve and can do the best economically on the global trade scene. I think this is a great opportunity. People here should be voting yes on this bill after all the hard bipartisan work. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer.
Gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, I deeply respect my friend and colleague from Oregon. I have a slightly different perspective on this, because I think the bill that is before us today is absolutely the least that could be done and get the bill passed. It's got a number of items I do support, like specialty crops we've been working on for some time. I'm pleased that there will be organics have an opportunity to get to crop insurance. But this bill, as I say, takes allegedly the savings from direct payments that have been opposed for years, but takes the savings and plows them back in to an enriched crop insurance program. It cuts $6 billion for conservation. Yes, there are some improvements in terms of administration, but it, in the end of the day, cuts $6 billion when land and water is under pressure and needs it the most. This is short-sighted. It's very likely going to cost a lot more in the long run for the reasons my friend from Wisconsin pointed out in terms of setting these targets higher. It is more generous in terms of rejecting a provision that was included in both the House and the Senate version to limit payments to individual farms to $50,000. The Conference Committee increases the limit to $125,000 and reopens a loophole closed in both the House and Senate bills, allowing the payments to be collected by multiple people. It's just one more example of where the Conference Committee that I think had one meeting and sort of massaged these things to put the pieces together to secure a majority on the floor, but is not, in any stretch of the imagination, in the best interest of most farmers, certainly not for the environment and for the American taxpayers. I respectfully urge its rejection.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the gentleman from Arkansas who's been very focused on these critical issues, especially those involving livestock. Mr. Womack, 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I, too, would like to offer my congratulations to the chairman and to his ranking member and my colleague from Arkansas, one of the committee members, Mr. Crawford, for their diligent work and coming up with this committee report. This was not easy, to say the least. That said, Mr. Speaker, because of the Senate's my way or the highway attitude, we are considering a conference report that does nothing to address an out-of-control agency, GIPSA, from imposing on American companies regulations that go well beyond congressional intent. Because of the Senate's all-or-nothing approach, we are considering a conference report that will subject American industries and companies to retaliatory tariffs. For me, it would be easy to vote against this conference report, but unlike my Senate counterparts, I recognize that in divided government, each side has to find common ground. Ultimately, this report, like many of the other bipartisan agreements that have been signed into law, move the ball forward by making much-needed reforms to federal programs and reducing spending. That's why, in the end, I will support it. I am hopeful, however, Mr. Speaker, that the House Appropriations Committee will do everything in its power to fix some of these mistakes. I, as a member of that committee, will fight to rein in GIPSA, and I will work to fix the country of origin labeling requirements. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Arkansas yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Fudge.
Gentlewoman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And let me begin by thanking Democratic Leader Pelosi for her confidence in me and appointing me as her representative to the Farm Bill Committee. I thank Representatives Peterson and Lucas and Senators Stabenow and Cochran for your leadership in negotiating this conference report. Throughout this process, it was my goal to ensure a fair and balanced farm bill. While I do not agree with some of the provisions of this conference bill, I firmly believe it is a good compromise. Given how far apart we were when this conference began, I am pleased members on both sides of the aisle and across the chamber were able to reach a consensus and show the American people Congress can work together. The agreement rejects categorical eligibility, something that we talked about for some time. The $8.6 billion savings in SNAP over 10 years, comes from a change in LIHEAP policy that would shrink benefits for approximately 850,000 households in 16 states. It does not eliminate a qualified household from access to SNAP, which was an important consideration on the difficult road to reach a compromise that prevents devastating cuts and changes to this critically needed program. This agreement also expands economic investment in low-income, urban, and rural communities. It provides certainty and sound agricultural policies for America's farmers and ranchers. Passing the Farm Bill has always been a bipartisan endeavor, and this conference committee report proves it is still possible for Congress to work through its differences and produce a balanced bill that meets the needs of the American people. We have negotiated the Farm Bill for the last 2 years. It is now time to move forward. I strongly encourage my colleagues to join me and vote yes on this bipartisan, bicameral conference agreement. I yield back.
Gentlewoman from Ohio yields back. Gentleman from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore.
Gentlewoman from Wisconsin is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so very much. I rise to oppose this compromise bill, although I congratulate people for working very hard on it. But the change in the heat and eat option is not just a little technical change. It's a change that has a freezing, chilling impact on every single SNAP recipient in Wisconsin. It not only increases bureaucracy, it decreases SNAP benefits to Wisconsin families whose benefits were cut already in November. I'm deeply concerned about the concrete hurt, hunger, and quite frankly, the frigid cold that we impose today on thousands of low-income American households, including seniors, children, and the disabled. As many as 255,000 SNAP cases in Wisconsin will be affected by this change. How do I explain this to the women, children, seniors, and disabled in households that this technical change is minor when they stand to lose $90 a month in benefits? When you consider what they lost in November, $90 a month to a poor family is not a technical change. It's a lot of money. It's more than $1,000 a year. The price of food is not going to go down, nor is the price of fuel. nor is the purchasing power of the poor going to go up. SNAP benefits already do not meet nutritional needs throughout the month. And this change will mean that real food will be off real tables and out of the stomachs of current recipients. The proposed cut on top of ARA resulted in a 9% drop in benefits allocation to Wisconsin. It's just too much. In the heat and eat states, that's as much as 11% of all beneficiaries. In one step, we impose new administrative costs on those states and make it harder to keep SNAP more responsive. Kids were off school 2 days this week because of the frigid, dangerous cold. And throwing these families back to heat or eat is the wrong thing to do. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Expired gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 1 minute to another one of my outstanding subcommittee chairmen, the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Austin Scott.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to first say thank you to Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Peterson. You know, the Ag Committee has some of the most conservative members in the House and some of the most liberal members in the House. And I'll tell you, we've got a lot of different opinions about what could and what should be done. But we had respectful discussion across the aisles and across the philosophical debates. And I've said many times from this podium that the foundation of our economy in this country is based on two things, one of them being manufacturing and the other one based on agriculture. This bill does the things that it needs to do to ensure that foundation for our agricultural producers to help with that part of the economy. It also ensures that as those farmers go forward and do the things that they do in providing the food, the nutrition, the fiber, not only for America but for the rest of the world, that Americans, when they go to the grocery store, will get more for their dollar than any other country as they seek to feed their families. We found agreement to clean up waste and abuse within many of the systems, including the food stamp system. We've given more money to food banks, which I think that is extremely important in making sure that the most needy of America's citizens have a place to go and make sure that they can get the nutrition that they need. We've put some new policies in place, and I'm confident that this bill is a move in the right direction. And where we've got those areas where we did not find the agreement, I'm confident that we'll be able to come back and work on those. I'm proud to support this bill, and Mr. Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Minnesota, Mr. Walz.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the chairman and the ranking member for your incredible hard work. The folks of Oklahoma and Minnesota should be proud of the representative that they've sent here. I'm proud of this piece of legislation. I stand in support of it. It's been 2 years. I feel like we've been at it most of our life. And while I hear people pointing out problems, I'm certainly there. If we'd have each written this bill, it would look different. And I hear people say it's not perfect. We had a former colleague once who said, of course it's not perfect. If you want perfect, you'll get that in heaven. And at times, this place is closer to hell. So this is a pretty good compromise that we've come up with. It certainly does things, and I am proud to say it makes bold new investments in clean, renewable, American-made energy. This is a tough decision. It's tough budgeting times, and the commitment of this committee to make that happen, I could not be prouder. It also takes bold steps moving the country forward on conservation measures. And one piece in here protecting our native prairies in the Midwest is fabulous. And I want to thank the gentle lady from South Dakota, Ms. Noem, for her unwavering effort on this. And I would say this. We reject the false choice that you have to choose between sportsman conservation and producing food on the land. You can have all things. And as the folks over at Ducks Unlimited said, this is one of the best pieces of conservation legislation in decades to come out to do that. So we've struck a balance here, producing food, feeding the world, clothing the world, empowering the world, at the same time providing for that heritage of sportsmen and the pristine beauty of our country. It can happen. So I thank you for that. And as a veteran, I'm proud that we took a bold step in here of trying to figure out ways to get returning veterans back on the land. Average age of a farmer in this country is 57 years old. We need new folks on the land, and that comes with high land prices and access to capital. Mr. Peterson, Mr. Fortenberry, myself worked on some beginning farmer and rancher legislation, Senator Klobuchar over on the Senate side, and the chairman made sure that happened in here. It's going to work. It provides some of that access, and it keeps our family farms continuing on. And so there's things to point out that you're frustrated with. I understand that, but there's a lot of good in this bill. It's a compromise. We came together. We tried to find and strike those balances. We continue to feed those folks who need the safety net. We continue to make sure that our producers have the certainty that they need. And I have to tell you, all across this country this morning, producers woke up, quietly went about their business, feeding, fueling, and powering America. We can say thank you by passing this bill.
Time has expired. Gentleman from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy now to yield to my colleague from Connecticut for 3 minutes, Mr. DELAURO.
Gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized for 3 minutes.
Rather than producing a farm bill that meets our traditional responsibilities as a Congress to support working families and farmers, this bill will do great damage to the nation's most vulnerable citizens. This bill slashes $8.6 billion from food stamps, our nation's most important anti-hunger program. This is in addition to the $11 billion already cut. And while it goes out of its way to reopen loopholes that benefit millionaires and billionaires. Interestingly enough, this bill increases the deficit this year, and the Congressional Budget Office has said that it doesn't save the $23 billion that it claims to save. This bill results in winners and losers. Winners, wealthy farmers and agribusinesses who will be able to pocket crop insurance subsidies and other government handouts beyond the already generous limits passed earlier by both the House and the Senate. Congressional Budget Office again says it increases spending on crop insurance by $5.7 billion. The Senate passed a bipartisan amendment to reduce the level of federal premium support for crop insurance participants who make over $750,000, but the conference raised it to $900,000. Winners. Against the express wishes of both houses, the bill's drafters reopened a loophole which was closed in both the House and the Senate bills, which allows farming enterprises to over-collect on commodity payments. Winners. But then who are the losers? And there are losers in the Farm Bill. The losers are the 850,000 low-income households all over America. 1.7 million Americans who will lose 66 meals a month because of this cut to food stamps. Who are we talking about? Children who will go hungry and spend all the next day at school. They'll go to bed hungry, spend the next day at school, unable to concentrate because they are thinking about food. Veterans, roughly 900,000 of whom receive food stamps, and working families who will face an empty fridge and a gnawing pain in their stomach for weeks and weeks. Seniors have to choose between food or warmth, whose health will deteriorate for want of sustenance. These are our own people we are consigning to this fate. Hard-working people in our districts and in our communities. And if you vote for this bill, you will have to look them in the eye and tell them to go without food, that they have to endure hunger because we had to give more handouts to millionaires and to billionaires. That is what this Farm Bill is about. Make no mistake. It increases hunger rather than decreases hunger in America. It picks winners and losers rather than ensuring we are supporting those that grow and those that consume the food we produce in this nation of plenty.
Lady, an additional 1 minute.
The gentlewoman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
It picks winners and losers rather than ensuring that we are supporting those that grow and those that consume the food that we produce in this nation of plenty, which is what farm bills have been about in the past. And I have negotiated nutrition titles in farm bills. This is a farm bill that undermines the health and the well-being of the most vulnerable in our society. I urge my colleagues to vote no and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman yields back the balance of her time. Gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The chair will receive a message.
Mr. Speaker, a message from the President of the United States.
Mr. Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I am directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois who's worked extremely diligently on this bill for its entire process. Mr. Davis. Rodney, 1 minute.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to Chairman Lucas for the leadership that he's shown in getting this conference report to the floor. I rise in strong support of this conference committee report. It is a common-sense piece of legislation that deals with things such as overregulation. That is a silent job killer that this administration is implementing through our agricultural industry. I'm proud that many of the provisions that I helped craft are in this final farm bill to reduce that opportunity for this administration to continue to kill jobs in this country. We see some common sense reforms to the SNAP program. Our goal should be to get people off of SNAP and into jobs. But, Mr. Speaker, this bill is a lesson in fiscal responsibility. It is one of the single largest cuts in mandatory spending that this Congress has done, which is putting our country on a path to complete fiscal responsibility. These are some of the decisions that we need to make. Most of those cuts are on the agricultural side. We need to understand that this is a common sense piece of legislation that's going to continue to reduce our deficit in this country, put us on a path to paying down our national debt, and putting excellent long-term farm policy in place for years to come. Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support, and I yield back the balance.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to former member of the committee, Mr. Walsh from Vermont.
Gentleman from Vermont is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to submit my full statement for the
Without
record.
objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized.
We serve in an imperfect Congress, and we're voting on an imperfect farm bill. In some cases, we spend far too much needlessly and irresponsibly, and in some cases, we spend far too little unwisely and irresponsibly. But a five-year farm bill is absolutely crucial to America. It is crucial to Vermont dairy farmers. This bill takes 3 important steps for dairy farmers in Vermont and throughout the country. 1, it creates a modern-day insurance program which protects farmers against the wild swings in feed prices, which are totally out of their control. 2, it protects taxpayers as well as farmers by limiting insurance to a farmer's base production. And 3, finally, it gives USDA the tools to intervene if dairy prices drop dramatically. Mr. Speaker, with its faults and imperfections, America does need a new farm bill. Agriculture is changing all around us. Local food is a growing sector in my state. The organic sector is booming, and people are much more aware of their food and farms. This farm bill invests in local foods, provides insurance to small farmers, and puts organic farming on a strong footing for the future. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Minnesota reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to yield myself 1 minute.
Gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 1 minute.
I want my colleagues to understand why those of us who are opposing this bill because of the SNAP cuts are so concerned. On November 1st, when the ARA monies ran out, all 47 million people who are on SNAP received a cut. For the average family of 3, that was about a $30 reduction per month, which is a lot of money when you're struggling to put food on the table, because quite frankly, the SNAP benefit in and of itself is not adequate. People end up going to food banks anyway. If this bill passes, for over 800,000 families, well over 1 million people, for the average family of 3, an additional $90 cut will go into effect. That's $120. I don't know where they're going to make that up. I don't know where they're going to go to get help. We could say, yeah, let the states pick it up. Well, the states aren't rushing to pick anything up. Well, let the charities pick it up. Read the newspaper last week, New York Times, all of our food banks are at capacity. They can't do it. So what's going to happen to these people? I mean, in the United States of America, the richest country in the history of the world, we ought to all pledge that nobody, and I mean nobody, ought to go hungry. That's what this fight is about. I reserve my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, might I inquire how much time the three of us have?
Gentleman from Oklahoma has 11.5 minutes. Gentleman from Minnesota has 8.5 minutes. Gentleman from Massachusetts, 6.5 minutes left.
And once more, Mr. Speaker, I have how much time?
11.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to yield to the gentle lady from the Dakotas who understands adversity of weather, understands the challenges that producers have. For a minute and a half, the gentle lady, Mrs. Noem.
Gentlewoman from South Dakota is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, and I thank the chairman for yielding and for his leadership on the Farm Bill, and also Ranking Member Peterson for all of his hard work and diligence in finding some common ground on a bill that's been under negotiations for far too long. I am so happy to be standing here with all of our members and our colleagues from the Farm Bill Conference Committee, which I was honored to be a part of, and also with everyone else who's going to support this bill that is extremely bipartisan. It's taken a lot of hard work to get to this point, but I'm proud of the fact that we have a product in front of us that's not only good for producers, it's good for consumers, it secures our food supply into the future, which is one of the safest in the world. We make reforms, we save billions of tax dollars, it's accountable to the taxpayer in this country, we conserve wildlife habitat, we provide a viable safety net for those who grow our food and for those who rely on food assistance as well. While Congress was writing this bill, my home state got hit with droughts and blizzards that cost us tens of thousands of livestock. The livestock disaster programs that I authored are in this bill and will provide much-needed relief to those who are struggling so hard during this difficult time. Our Black Hills National Forest is going to gain some regulatory relief and additional tools to combat the pine beetle that is destroying our Black Hills and our forests across this country. The 9 tribes in South Dakota are going to get a permanent Office of Tribal Relations, a real victory for all of our tribes across this country who really need to have better communication within USDA. Thousands of hunters in South Dakota and across the country every year are going to be glad to know that they've got a provision in place that will help protect grasslands. And whether you grow corn, wheat, soybeans, or cotton, producers are going to have more choices, which really at the end of the day is going to help them cover their risk that they take every year. I'm proud of the bill, I'm proud of our work, and I urge our colleagues to support the bill.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. Without objection, the gentleman from Oklahoma reserves the balance of his time. Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Speaker, I'm now pleased to yield